I like to work very loose, and that's also something in Grotowski. It's about being very relaxed. It's about letting things come through your body, so it's not holding the tension. As we say, a lot of your tension from the day, because a lot of us would be from maybe 1 or 2 hour ballet classes and 2 hours contemporary, and then maybe sat down for an hour, have a lecture. So we were all doing very different things. Started to get them to do things from the exercises. So saying and then playing with that, but not making it too out there, just making it something really simple. Especially for my dancers, they were quite nervous because we were a small group. So a lot of what happens in a group mentality is you wait for one person to go first, then a few more people, then it'll start to build. Whereas what I was asking is quite tough. I'm asking them all to do it just all together and at the same time. So that's kind of what we ended up doing. So I started building this. I don't let people laugh. That doesn't mean I don't like people have fun. That's kind of the core things of what I always push through. But this is about focusing. So it's keeping that kind of laughing out of it. Because a lot of laughing and things like that is actually people because they're nervous. So again, it's just making them do it until they get to a point where they feel comfortable. And then it starts to build from that. And then it was doing who, and then we, and then it's these things that you can see when you say it. You start to tense different parts of your jaw. You get different vibrations to your body. It resonates in different areas. And we started to use that to work together as a group. And then, so this builds, and then I got them up to the floor. They started slowly walking. The more they were starting to bounce off each other. It was that focus in the space, but also then it was listening to the space. I told them to go up to different parts of the space and to make these sounds and to make these noises and to see what would happen if they went into a different part. I didn't let them change the level or the noise that was coming out. So it kept it all pretty much the same, but the only thing that changed it was from where they were in the room and where they stood. At least hour and a half to 2 hours.
Why?
Exploring both emotions in a playful way, it became easier for me to deal with my own personal experiences with the emotions. So emotionally, I wasn't being affected massively, so I was quite stable. I think is kind of a weird way to put it, within the studio, and I could fully explore the creative side of the process and the movements. I did have a couple moments where it was hard, but I think because of the space we were in and the atmosphere that was created, it was definitely easier for me to focus and I felt comfortable. So emotionally, I don't think it had a massive effect of me outside of the studio when I wasn't in the space.
Then we went back into the violin score. And then I just wanted to see it and what had happened after working with that. And immediately there was a change in the space. There was a focus, but there was also, they were interacting more with each other. They were more aware of each other in the space. They were more aware of the space itself, how the sound would travel, where the sound would travel to, how they could play with each other in the space, still stick to task and still getting through the piece. Well, not getting through, still performing it, but also being able to play with each other in the space, not being afraid to have that interaction, to find that, not a fake one, but that natural connection and that playfulness. So that's kind of what those tasks enable my dancers to do. It's being able to, it sounds like fun, and it looks like fun, it is, but it's that focus, and it gives them the skills to feel comfortable to use them in the space, and then to go on to perform. And then there's other ones where it's about connect and disconnect. So that's a non-vocal task. So that one was about eye connections in the space, connecting with other dancers in the space, moving as one, moving different times, taking cues off each other. So it's basically syncing together, and that is so important in especially my kind of work, where a lot of it is about feeding on the dancer's energy in the space, feeding off each other, reading each other's emotions in the space. And that's the thing, a lot of the time whenever people are on stage, they become very real emotions. I've seen dancers crying, screaming, getting actually, they look like they're going to go for you. Was to keep that intensity, the real feeling behind it, which is psychosomatics as well. which is something that coincides with the process. So it's about using your emotions and tapping into those emotions and maybe those experiences and those feelings and bringing them into the space to make a real reaction, because it's coming from a real place. Again, it's that authenticity. So that's kind of what those tasks do, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. It really is. So preparation tasks help build these skills, this listening, this connection, this disconnection in the space, that making sure that it is all planned and it is all together, but it's real at the same time. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. But I was lucky with the amazing dancers that I had. So it's keeping those in mind, which is probably one of the hardest parts of the creation process, because you've got the video that you'll probably see, which is like a minute long, 45 seconds long. Whereas in the actual piece, that is about 10 minutes, 10 and a half minutes. But we worked on that for at least 10 hours. So it's that kind of thing that building on those preparation tasks enables you to build that and to make that real and to make that honest in space, which is what it's kind of all about.
Time. Emotionally in the space, I think it was quite difficult to connect with at the beginning, obviously because I was trying to connect with myself and I didn't really know whether I was ashamed of something or guilty for something, and I didn't really think of anything that I could have been guilty or ashamed of that I would be able to connect with. So putting myself in like a different person's shoes and creating a storyline was definitely a way that I could become emotional. And obviously being emotional in the space helped me progress my movement and helped me express my feelings and emotions towards this. So I could really develop how I felt around other people and use this as a motive to carry on my story, because on my own I would be ashamed when people were around me. I'd be absolutely terrified in case they found out what I was ashamed for, and they'd be ashamed of me as well, and if they'd make me feel more guilty for certain things. So I was definitely becoming more aware of my emotions in the space.
Within the first 2 weeks, I will usually have about 20 to anywhere up to 40, 45 minutes of just pure material. I create a lot like that. I like to play in the space. I want to see what the dancers are creating. It's a chance for me to throw ideas in, see what works, what doesn't work straight off the bat. And then maybe stuff I'll keep and then I'll revisit later, or something I can turn into, oh, that would be a good preparation task, or this might be a good warm-up task, not necessarily something I would put in the piece. So that's generally what I'm doing whenever I do all of that creating. It's about, again, it's in itself, it's almost like those first couple of weeks, I do the preparation tasks, and a lot of it is, but even the creation tasks sometimes are preparations in themselves for the intensity of the piece, what I'm looking for, what I'm going to see them doing, the way that they behave, the way that they like to move, the way that I like to move. So it works. You'll see different things. I always tell my dancers, don't do something weird about me, because I will probably use it. And that thing has happened a few times. There's parts in the piece where
move into your movement really fast,
and they start pushing each other while one's standing there, and then they scream or they go in a huff and they direct it at one person. So it was things like that came from discussion, but also those silly moments, those quirks, those little weird sides of the personality. That's the things that I like. We have a very strange working environment, but the dancers seem to enjoy it, and so do I, because you get to know them on a very personal basis and you work with them a lot, and they work with you. So
close.
You see each other at the points of the day where you're so exhausted that you can come in and you can sit down and you can still mess around. So that was kind of what we did. So it was those weird little things that they did, which is kind of what this creative task helped to bring out. It is very dark and it is very heavy, and it's very deep, and it's something that we don't like to consider a lot because it is hard. It's not something that we get rid of. Shame and guilt are things that we carry with us every day, like experiences. So it's that kind of, it's a lot of things to take on, especially as a dancer. It's a lot to take on in the space without using words to get it out. You can't really disassociate from it, and I know that's not me saying about other things, but it's hard to disassociate from that, and it's putting yourself in there and being really honest with things that you might not even know about yourself. So it's those things you need to have fun, and that fun does come through in the piece. Like there's that bits of humour where we've got dancers screaming at each other and then other ones laughing at each other in the face, and then it turns a bit dark, and then we've got other ones where there was a part where I start to roll down the stage, but it's like whenever you roll out of bed, that's what it came from. We were messing about the studio, and then they were saying about the way my hair looked, and then I was like, oh, it's because I can be arsed to get out of bed. And then I messed around and flopped myself on the floor, and then they made a joke saying, oh, that's how you get out of bed. So that's kind of where that came from. And then in the piece it starts off kind of funny, but it's with this really intense duet, and you've got me just throwing myself down the stage. So it's those kind of things, those juxtapositions, which is again something that's brought in by that creative task and that process. But yeah, so we create all of that, we get all of that information in, and then I took out entire duets that were about 15 minutes long, because it's not the quantity of the piece, it's about the quality of the work. And if it's not sticking to task, and it's not, if you don't know what you're getting across, because sometimes I'll just go in and I'll let the dancers throw something together, I'll throw something together, and then I come back to it a week later, and then I look at it and go, yeah, it's nice, but this actually hasn't got anything, I can't see anything that I am talking about in here. This doesn't show anything that I am trying to get across in this piece. So that's when I go, let's scrap it. Or sometimes if the dancers really want to keep it, I'll go, right, you work it because I wanted to say this. So it's letting them take ownership of it as well. That I have learned is you can have people go on and they can do it technically until it's amazing, but it is not about that. It's still about that. We're still dancers at the end of the day, and we are training our bodies to do what we're supposed to and trying to strive to be better. But it's about not just redoing it and going in and going through the motions and then, oh yeah, I wouldn't let my dancers mark through work. If you perform it, then that's it. There's none of this marking. Like, we might walk through it, but we don't mark it. Because then that starts to devalue the actual emotion in it. It starts to devalue the way they behave, those connections that we've worked so hard on getting. It's about re-engaging with it. It's about getting back to that place that it was originally and getting that real emotion. So it's about keeping it fresh, about keeping it on task and true to what it was.
Whereas after all this, shame to me is something that will never ever leave you, and it's always going to be there in the back of your mind, no matter how hard you try to get rid of it. Like, things in daily life will make you become ashamed of something that you've done, whether it's something small or little, but it's a personal connection that you have with something, and it's something that you're like deeply sorry that you've done. And it can be something that can get you down and keep you down for however long it takes until you realise you can get rid of your shame. Whereas now my view against guilt would be that you can feel guilty, but you can be happy at the same time. Whereas before, I thought you'd just feel guilty and it'd be fine and it'd be over. And I still believe that now. I still think if you're guilty, after a while you'll get over it and you won't really think about it again. And if you do think about it again, you most likely won't feel guilty about it because it's been and done and it's what's in the past. And being guilty, I usually would find, and I would to me would be something so small and something that doesn't really matter that much. So you can be guilty at the time, but later on in life it's not that much of an issue. So I think my opinions on guilt have stayed the same, but shame has definitely changed because it was something I didn't really ever have to connect with, and connecting with it has made me realise it's different and see what it really is about.
Personally, I think they almost work together simultaneously. I definitely view shame as a feeling that we all feel, but it eventually kind of drifts into the back of our mind. I think it's definitely emotion that's always there, but I don't think we almost always kind of focus on it, and I don't think it always has a massive effect on us all. I think there's certain things that causes us to feel more shame, but I don't think it's ever a massive overriding emotion. Whereas I view guilt, and I think as I viewed it before as well, before the process, and it's constantly there. It's an emotion, I think, that we all consider and we all think about when making decisions, and that helps us, as well as our conscience, to make moral decisions. I think subconsciously, sometimes consciously, but I think a lot of the time, whether we know it or not, we think, well, would I feel guilt? How guilty do I feel about doing this? I think it's an emotion that can come actually before even doing an action, whereas shame comes after. I think guilt can come for just thinking about things and feeling a certain way. And I think it's an emotion that's constantly there. It's constantly in our heads. Whether we're doing something at that moment that makes us feel guilt, or whether it's something from a while ago that's still in our heads, guilt, I think, is always there.
I feel shame is an initial response to something, to an action, whereas guilt, I feel like, is an emotional response, and it can kind of stick around longer than the initial thing or whatever it is you feel guilty about. And sometimes it's not even necessarily something you've done.
So to anyone else doing a piece like this or taking part in a piece like this, I would definitely recommend keeping an open mind and being positive about this situation, because it can be very daunting, especially being young, if you're a young person in this dance, or if you had never connected with something like this before. It can definitely be difficult, so you have to see a positive outlook on it, and remember that you are doing it for a dance piece and it's not something to personally hurt a person, which some people would come across it as that way. And you have to remember that you have to only go as far as you're comfortable with, and if you need to take a step back, make sure you're aware and tell the choreographer that, so that they are aware, because the choreographers don't want to hurt you. They're just trying to get you to break out to this point, so it helps them with their research and helps them to connect the piece together. But I would definitely say have an open mind, because what I found was in the piece we had so much fun. Even though it's a very dark topic, we could bring a lot of humour to it, because a lot of things that we were ashamed of actually became, we were like, whoa, we don't need to be ashamed of that, like, it's okay. And we found like very few humorous parts in it that could play like a very significant role. Even though it's a very deep subject, we can bring a lot of alignment to it and make people realise it's not as deep and dark as people make it out to be, and make them. I'd definitely say my favourite part of the process and that I enjoyed the most was working with Charlotte. She really inspired me to connect with my emotions more, because it's something I don't really enjoy doing whilst I'm dancing, and learning new techniques that I wouldn't personally choose to work with. And it was really interesting, the research that she'd gone into and how much she'd researched about the project to help me and other dancers connect and really be inspired by the piece. So I really did enjoy working with Charlotte, and the whole process was really worked really well, and it was really good to work with her, and it was a big confidence boost knowing that I could do something that big, not realising that I could and never giving myself the opportunity to. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Charlotte.
And I think what I would say to anyone that's going to partake in this is that, one, to have fun and to enjoy it, because it's a really great process and I really enjoyed it myself. And I think that, yes, get on with the work, yes, get through it, which we did. We created that work, we got through it, but at the same time we were having fun. And I think that's really important to get a really, I think that helps to create, I think that helps for us as dancers to get along and feel comfortable with each other. But also that not to take on too much. If it gets too much, if emotionally or physically it's too much for you, then speak to Charlotte or whoever the choreographer is at the time, or whoever it is. Not only for this piece but for other pieces, just definitely communicate. If it gets too much for you, they're there to help. They're not going to make you do things you don't want to do. So just, communicate. And finally, I think my favourite part of the process and the piece was definitely creating and performing the violin section. I think that was definitely my favourite section. I think it's called the violin section because, well, not only because of the string music, but I did an epic miming of me playing a violin. But I really enjoyed the freedom of that section. It was structured improv, but at the same time, it wasn't. We had our characters, we kind of did what we want, and it definitely brought out the weirder and slightly more playful side of my creative process. I think I definitely kind of almost shrunk back to my childhood, which is almost like, I mean, in relation to the piece, was definitely like a facade of that guilt and shame. But that was definitely my favourite section because it was just stupid, but it wasn't. It was really fun, but it really got the point across. So that was definitely my favourite section.
My advice would be to fully just go for it. Once you've kind of got over that first barrier, it's really fun, and you definitely find a new way of communicating, especially to an audience. It's very different, but you find a new version of yourself as a performer, which is really interesting and really cool. My favourite part of the process was the fact that we were able to share our ideas of shame and guilt, and maybe some personal things about shame and guilt, but it was such a nice environment to do so that it didn't feel pressurized and there was no judgment, and it was just really calm and everybody was so nice. And Charlotte she didn't attempt to bring things up, or she was very responsible with the information she was given, which was really good.
I can feel it, like black paint dripping down a white wall. So all the time, and even when I'm trying to forget it, trying to fill a void, to ignore it, it's still scratching and knocking at the door. The decisions to make between whether it will go right, whether it go wrong in every possible outcome. If you're a good person, if you're a bad person. You think if you don't show it, then no one can see it. You think if you don't talk about it, is, someone could know your darkest secret, and they still have no idea how you feel. This moral compass, there's tension between who I want to be and who I am. Feeling guilt for everything I do, feeling shame for everything I am. Yet it's in everyone. This constant struggle of who we are, who we want to be.